The Center for Sacred Window Studies has been training postpartum care providers, professionals who work with new families, and individuals passionate about postpartum care since 2018. We regularly host live free events alongside our online and in-person training and certification programs. Hop on our newsletter list to get direct access to all of our events and community support gatherings. Our mission is not only in training conscious postpartum care providers, but in fostering a robust, informed, and thriving community of postpartum professionals. Once you step inside, you're family forever. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com to add your email to our newsletter list. You can support our work by subscribing to the Sacred Window podcast and sharing with someone you know who would love it. Thanks for being here and participating in the culture-wide shift that recognizes the need for and the importance of conscious postpartum care. Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. Today we're talking about Vata Dosha. I am so happy to welcome Molly McConnell back with us. Molly has done an episode with us on Kapha Dosha. We realized that we needed to do one on all of them, these beautiful combination of the elements in Ayurveda. If you are new to thinking about doshas, this is a perfect place to begin. If you are in love with the doshas already, of course, like you never get tired of hearing different people talk about what Ayurveda is for them. But Molly is the owner of Cultivate Balance. She is based in Asheville, North Carolina, but she sees clients virtually from everywhere. She runs a seasonal cleanse that is a way for many people to kind of come together and be accountable and be in community and do this thing that isn't necessarily always familiar in a safe and supported place. But Molly just has, I love the way that you think about the doshas, the way that you embody them, and the way that you've put your routines and the way that you live your life into practice around the wisdom of these elements. So thank you, Molly, for being here.
I'm so happy to be back with you. It's like my favorite conversation to talk about the doshas.
Yeah, and we get to do it together. And it's not necessarily just like, I think it's so important. Yes, we teach about postpartum, but that's like, a little incubator of all of life. And so when we're thinking about conscious care for ourselves, like we need to be looking at the long game, which is life in a human body in
Right,
all the stages.
right. And when it comes to postpartum care, and we're talking about the doshas within that sacred window, it's really helpful to have the background information to just know a little bit about each of them because they all come into play in that time of life, as well as, in every chapter of life, the doshas play a role. So.
Yeah, it's so true. And when we understand the qualities, like what are the qualities of Vata dosha, what are the qualities of Pitta and Kapha, we can start to see it in our behavior, in the way we're digesting, in the way that the way that our skin looks, the way that our voices sound. Like you start to see them everywhere, and it just helps us to become more aware of ourselves and others. It's amazing.
Mhm. And it's really the first step in kind of understanding what to do when something feels off. If you can understand the qualities of the dosha and kind of start to pinpoint that, then you can start to understand maybe what qualities will be balancing and what choices can align with those qualities. And we'll talk about specific examples today, but I really think um, understanding the doshas and the qualities of the doshas is so empowering for people who are on kind of a personal wellness journey and want to feel a sense of responsibility for their own self-care. Like the doshas are the language of that approach, I think.
Absolutely. And we don't automatically, many of us don't automatically get the understanding of this is what my doshic combination is. Like this is what is primary for me. And this is because the way that we come into that balance looks different for you than it does for me. It looks different for my kids than it does for me. So being able, that's how we can offer this really sort of curated support to people when we know what's in balance for them. And so Vata dosha, one thing that I remember learning right off the bat in Ayurveda school was that we live in a Vata world. The qualities of Vata
Mhm.
are sort of most easily elevated than the other qualities. And so Vata dosha, no matter if we have a high Vata constitution, like everybody needs Vata
Yeah.
management.
Yes. And Vata is the dosha. Let's just back it up a little bit to say Vata is a combination of the air and space elements. It's very much like the wind. And because it has this windy quality of movement, it is just the dosha that's most likely to go out of balance. It has this kind of tendency toward overactivity and a real need for a container. Otherwise, it will just take up the space, move into the space, keep moving. And we can feel that in our bodies in the form of anxiety, racing thoughts, dry skin, all of these imbalances that are related to Vata. They can really sweep in and move through the body in a way that makes us feel unsettled. And the more we know about Vata, the more we can work with it, provide the container, provide the grounding, provide the opposite qualities so that we can feel more steady and more aware when Vata starts to go out of balance, we bring it back before it runs wild because like you're saying, it just is the dosha to have that. I mean, the ancient Ayurvedic texts would say, there's like 15 diseases of kapha, there's like, I don't know what, 20, 30 diseases of pitta, and there's 70 diseases of vata. So vata for all of us, regardless of what your constitution is, it needs a lot of care. It really has this kind of like fragility. It needs extra attention, I think, and especially like you're saying in this world that we live in.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. That's awesome to listen to your explanation of that. I'm encourage our listeners to really think about the elements of wind and space and think about the qualities of those two elements. So when we think about wind, if we're outside in like a windy place for a while, we're going to start to get like dry lips and like dry mouth. We're going to start to feel maybe a little cold. We might feel um, like after a while, you're just tired of like that feeling of wind in your ears, like you want to put a hat on or something. Um, with like that dryness, like you can start to feel like rough skin after a little bit of being out in those elements. And like the feeling of space, sometimes it's so expanded. And like,
Mhm.
how might that feel in your consciousness or in your mind, like when you are so expanded? Um, there's, when I think about like what these elements actually feel like, it helps me to kind of conceptualize like how those qualities are manifesting in my digestion. Like, am I experiencing excess gas? Am I feeling like a little flighty or spacey in my thought patterns? How does it show up for you when you like see these qualities like coming up in your human experience, Molly?
And I am noticing Vata right now in my body in the form of cold toes. Like cold hands and feet is a big one. Vata, coldness can get kind of trapped in the extremities and in the fingers and toes. That's one kind of sign for me to check in with Vata. And I loved what you were talking about the space and expansiveness and how that relates to the mind. And it really has me thinking not just about the ways that we experience Vata challenges, but also the gifts of Vata and the gift of feeling that expansive energy, that energy of possibility, that deep connection with our spirituality, that subtle energy is all Vata, and it's so inspiring. There's an adaptability, there's a curiousness, there's so much goodness that comes when Vata is cared for. And I think often the conversation about doshas just kind of gets into what the challenges are without also honoring that each dosha, and we talked about this in kapha season, each dosha really has these beautiful gifts. So I didn't nearly list them all. We can talk about more as we go, but when I think of Vata for myself, I also think of clarity, inspiration, like when I'm having really good ideas and I'm kind of in that flow state in my mind, to me, that all feels like just beautiful, a balanced expression of Vata. And I can tell when it's tipping into excess Vata, when that spaciousness of the mind starts to feel like anxiety, racing thoughts, overactive thoughts, when suddenly the clarity becomes too clear and it's kind of unsettling, right? There's a line on that. So those are some ways that I notice Vata in myself.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when I first was in Ayurveda school and we were learning about the doshas, it was like the literal translation of dosha is like waste material or something, or it's like uh I can't remember the exact word, but it's like, to me it was like, and how it was explained to me is that, when the dosha is in excess, it is like an imbalance. It's like we don't, but it's that understanding of what is the ideal state of balance for me and my body. And it's like that is where those ideal qualities and experiences start to come out. That's when, you know, have the perfect amount of wind to balance the fire and the water and the earth, and all of it is expressed in the ways that make us feel our best, the ways that we can show up best in the world, all of that. Yeah, it's really beautiful, and it's also, I would say if we look at the way that our sort of modern society is structured now, let's just like spend a minute talking about like how like Vata is just in imbalance in our culture. And to Pitta dosha to some degree as well, I believe. But like the thing about Vata that I'll just quickly interject is that as it's this, wind and space, it's going to move other things and potentially move the other elements into an exaggerated or elevated state out of balance. So sometimes you'll hear like Vata pushing Pitta or Vata pushing Kapha. So we have this kind of unique ability of Vata dosha to like activate those other doshas in ways that we might not want it to be activated.
Completely. And when we talk about the fact that this world is very Vata provoking, people might wonder, like, well, what does that mean? Where is the Vata showing up? Screen time. Screen time is a huge Vata aggravator, Pitta as well, but there's a sense of overstimulation, and that really gets the Vata kind of going and rising in the body. And we also see it like in the desire to be so productive that we're constantly multitasking, like that that also really aggravates Vata and can create these imbalances of anxiousness and gas and bloating, and all of these things can manifest physically from being kind of overstimulated and overwhelmed by our environments, which are really constantly demanding that we do too much, that we take in more than we can digest on a mental level as well, which gets into, like mental ama. Toxins aren't just in the digestive system. They can exist in our bodies in other forms. And yeah, because the Vata is so provoked by all of these things coming in, it can create imbalances in multiple senses.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think for us to be able to sort of navigate the way that our life, our work is, the way that, screens and technology has become a major part of how we work and live, it's not really about not doing those things, but it's about noticing when we feel that imbalance happening. And in fact, as I was listening to you, I was realizing, and I've noticed this honestly over the past couple of weeks, I think I've reached like a place in my life and evolution where I am deciding to not be so hard on myself about getting everything done that I would like to get done. Like it's literally just not going to happen. But and I've known that, but I've something is happening in myself that I'm not putting those expectations on myself, and therefore the way that I'm able to enjoy the things that I do have time for has totally shifted. It's like really expanded in like a good way. So my vata is going down because I'm taking the pressure off of myself.
Yes. And there really is something to be said for gentleness as a medicine for Vata. You know, when we think of the qualities of Vata, like the wind, it's cold, rough, dry. And so softness, smoothness, gentleness are all balancing energies to approach ourselves with or to bring into our activities and our foods to balance Vata. So when you're saying I've kind of had this change in approach where I'm just not forcing myself, not expecting myself to do it all. I see that as the Vata medicine of gentleness. And when you bring that gentleness in and Vata can settle in a little bit more, you get the gifts of Vata, which are the expansion, the presence of being with the thing that you really want to be with or committed to be with, the presence of your attention. That's that's really beautiful, Christine, and it's not easy to do in our world. So well done.
Thank you. I love how so much of what is medicinal or Ayurvedic is not any substance. It's about shifting a behavior. It's about stopping and noticing what quality needs to change. And then, for example, like I'm slowing down right now. I'm just going to stop and I'm going to slow down and I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. And it's very, in our world, we don't always want to look at stop and take. It's not satisfying to look at that as like a remedy.
Mhm.
But I am telling you, it works quicker
Yes.
and it's always accessible and it's free and it works better than most things.
Well, and the
Maybe
reason why
everything.
reason why it works better is because Vata is the wind, like breath, prana, it's all so efficiently linked that working with your breath really is the most effective channel for working with Vata dosha. It doesn't mean it's always easy. I think it sounds simple to take a few breaths, but to remember to do it, to stop doing something else and really take the time is can be difficult, especially in this world where we're taught to do so many things at once. To just only do one thing and slow down is hard. So I honor that, and it's such a good reminder. Like when in doubt, when you feel that vata rising, a little bit of overwhelm, uncertainty, a little bit unsettled, just a couple of deep breaths will give you a lot of information. And it might then help you think, I'm gonna go make a cup of ginger tea. I'm gonna put some socks on. I'm gonna take a walk around the block and just come back. Sometimes I think the breath is like the first practice that then gives us clarity on whatever other tangible action the body is craving to continue toward that doshic alignment.
It's like the recalibration.
Yes.
It's like the pause that allows like the clouds to part and then you can like see what the next best thing is. But
Mhm.
until we do that slowdown, that deliberate, okay, there's too much movement, there's too much here, like slowing and simplifying. I wish it wasn't seen as such a hard thing to do.
I like to um, tell people to like put a note on their computers, like deep breaths or an alarm on your phone, a gentle alarm, like chimes, to go off at 2 p.m. and you just pause and you breathe for 2 minutes. Like I really think that a lot of it is just needing the reminder. And so, whatever works for each of us in our life is great. I really benefit from gentle reminder alarms and notes around. They serve as kind of visual cues to help me do the practice that then guides me to that next balancing action. And I think if people could just dial in those little systems, then it would become second nature. And that is something that I work with clients on in my Ayurveda practice a lot is like what what is the barrier? It could be anything. Like no barrier is too small or too big or too silly. Like we all have them. And if we can figure out kind of what it is, like, oh, I just no, I'd like to breathe deeply. I just don't know where to put it in my day. I don't know how to incorporate it. I try to do it and then I forget. If we can get to that, then then we can find a way to bring the practice in. So I'm with you that I wish it didn't feel I wish the barriers weren't there, and I'm very much here for like, okay, why does it feel hard, and let's workshop that a little bit.
Well, and also like we talked about before we hit record today, Molly, we talked like about, we mentioned how, it takes a little bit when you move to a new place to get settled and for those roots to settle underground so that the action can be visible and happen above ground. And so I think we got to think about like integrating new things into our lives that are important to us. Putting the groundwork down, it might feel hard. It might feel like work. It might feel like, oh, darn it, I forgot again. But putting the time and the effort and the commitment in will yield like you won't be able to imagine your life without it after a little while. It will just become part of your muscle memory, part of your body's understanding of what to do at certain times. And that is really, in Ayurveda, that concept of dinacharya, daily practice, it is like woven into the culture. So you've got, little old men and ladies like putting oil on their body every single day because that's just what you do and that's what they've done their entire lives. And so that, concept of like, yeah, like we all automatically do things every single day, taking the time to implement some that are going to help us establish this really solid foundation.
Yes.
It's
And
worthy.
And if I think you're making such a good point, and if someone is listening to this and thinking, well, I don't have a routine or I don't have daily practices. Yes, you do. Like every day, everything we do in a day is a practice. We're always practicing something. And you might have some practices that are actually habits that don't serve you, but those are daily practices. Those are making up your routine, and we're all doing it. So it's a matter of being in choice and being in intentional relationship to the extent that we can be with how we use our time and how we use our energy to weave those things in so that then they do become second nature. And I acknowledge that that also is really hard because our culture is very attached to convenience and instant gratification. So there is some kind of overcoming of those pieces for it to feel worth taking the 3 deep breaths, putting the oil on the body, etc. But I think Christine and I can both attest, once you do it, you feel the benefits. It's a positive feedback loop. It's so worth it. It becomes the framework for your entire life. But we all have to get over that hump of, well, it doesn't feel convenient. I'm not sure if it's going to work right away. You can trust with Ayurveda, which is this time-tested system, thousands and thousands of years old, that the practices work, but they only work if you do them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's very real. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Molly.
I'm just curious, what are your how do you work with Vata in a day? What are your practices for balancing Vata, for harnessing it? You mentioned the breathing. Is there a specific breathing that you do, or what does that look like for you in a day?
I love that you asked that because I literally was wondering the same thing about you. So I'll pass the candle to you next. But for me, I think I notice Vata pretty regularly. It's a very full life for me right now. There's tons of movement. So Vata is like very fast moving. So I feel like um there's like I have to look at my calendar so much to like retain all the things that I know are going to happen in the day. So for me, one thing that's really important is that when I get towards the end of the day, like after dinner, I just like try to, if I can, or when I get home from whoever's activity, like I get cozy. I get soft, like cozy clothes on and slippers, and I like snuggle. I snuggle on the couch, or I'll like get my book. I will take a hot bath. Like that end of the day needs to be like, so yeah, warm and soft and snuggly, oily, like the abhyangas are great for me at the end of the day. That is a huge go-to. I also find like there's like a moment in the afternoon sometimes where I'll like really just feel like I'm wanting to crash. Like there's been too much brain activity, like all of a sudden I'm sort of hit with like a wall of tired. And so I find for me like stepping outside and like with like a hot lemon water like helps kind of revive me in like a soothing, gentle way. Maybe like, taking my dog for a little walk or something. So I notice like that tends to help that sort of Vata brain energy crash that happens. Um, I like kind of being in cold, and my heritage is like cold places. Like I'm pretty Scandinavian and Irish, and so I have like those colder European country, those people are in my ancestral line, and I think that impacts me for sure because I actually love winter. I love the cold and the snow, but I like to be cozy in it. So I'm like super happy if I'm like in a cold environment, but like bundled really well.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And it's such a gift to Vata to get to be cozy.
How are you sharing your gifts and passion for caregiving with others? In a world where education and awareness around the postpartum window is lacking or missing from our modern systems, we have a profound opportunity to shift that paradigm. You may be a few simple offerings away from making a truly impactful difference in the lives of mothers and families in your community. We are here to support your journey in the ways that work best for you. Schedule a conscious care strategy session to meet one on one with me, and let's identify the right next step for you to begin a path of conscious care for new families that fits your life and your needs. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session to schedule a time that works best for you. That's www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, certainly, like I notice, especially connected to my menstrual cycle, there's certain times of my cycle where Vata is higher. So, like the week before I get my period, I actually have like a spike in Vata dosha. So, like my digestion will slow down, my elimination will slow down. And so, those are the times. And, postpartum is similar too. Like, postpartum, we're looking at in general a high Vata time. Post surgery, this is like a high Vata time. Anytime there's major transition, this is a high Vata time. So, folks, you might notice some of these things during those parts of your life. But that's when I'm like, okay, let me do like the warm breakfast cereals with like ghee and some like soupier foods, or I'll fix like soups for dinner rather than, something that's more complex or hard to digest. And that, usually does the trick.
Yeah, yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. And I don't know if we've said this explicitly, but fall is Vata season. So that is another time where any of us may experience a spike in Vata throughout the year.
Yeah, totally. And think about it, like, depending on where you live, of course, fall is like windier, it's
Mhm.
brisker more often. And it's like that transition-y part of the year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, I love hearing about your practices. It's making me excited for the transition.
Yeah, tell me about yours. What do you do? Like, what is your go-to?
Yeah, I really believe that morning time is sacred. And for where I am in my life right now, I'm able to take morning time to do a lot of my practices before I start my workday. So I wake up at about 5 and I journal. I do morning pages, 3 pages. It takes about 30 minutes. And that has been so beautiful for my Vata because it helps me kind of clarify the busyness in my mind. I'm surprised by what new ideas come through when I finish that. I feel more at peace and I also feel some direction for how I want to be thinking about my day. I also have a very steady meditation practice. So I do morning pages and I meditate right after. And then I practice yoga, I'll go for a walk or, get my body moving. But those two things for me, it takes an hour. And a couple years ago, even if you had said take an hour to do Vata supporting practices before anything, I would have been like, no way, there's not time in the day for that. And somehow my life has shifted and my priorities have shifted enough that it's become non-negotiable for me to do those two things to the extent that I can every morning. And it really, really grounds my Vata for the day. Um, I'm constantly drinking warm beverages. Like this is just warm water. Maybe there's a cardamom pod in here throughout the day to support Vata. And similar to you, I experience that kind of like crash, or for me, it can show up as like kind of difficulty focusing in the middle of the afternoon. And that is the moment in the day when we transition from Pitta time, which goes from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., to Vata time, which is from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. So I experience that early Vata time of the afternoon as a bit distractible for me. And so sometimes I will even like lay down for 10 minutes and like set an alarm or something, and I often don't even need the full 10 minutes, but I just need to not look at my screen, to not continue to try to solve the problem. It's like that pause with the deep breaths that you were speaking of. Or I'll take a walk and get the prana from the plants and the sunshine, and usually that helps kind of re-regulate my vata, and then I'm ready to come back into a more inspired space. And I loved that when you answered this question, you started out talking about your evening transition, because that, I mean, that is a vata time until 6 p.m. And I think people can kind of get spun out and not close the chapter on work and errands and then open the chapter on connection and winding down. And when that all gets blurred together, often it can impact our ability to sleep well, to feel relaxed, all of that. So I'm with you 100%. Any type of intentional transition activity between a work day and, wind down time is huge. And I similarly like to change my clothes and like maybe even just go sit on the couch, maybe get out a book, just something to kind of signal that I'm entering a softer space.
Yes. Yes, totally, totally. Oh, I love it. And I hear you, Molly. There were so many years where like I knew how beneficial it would be to like get up early and have that morning practice. And there were just a lot of years where like, when my kids were babies, like I just struggled to even get enough sleep, period. And I couldn't do that. And more so, I've been able to do some of that now, though I still feel somewhat sleep deprived. So I generally will, like, after my kids go off to school, like, that is the pocket where I can then, like, sit down. I've got a little meditation bench, like a space where it's like, let's get clear. But I find it so incredible how taking that time at the beginning of the day like sets the whole foundation for what comes after. And when we have that like grounded, settled, clear intention of who we are, what am I today, what am I bringing to this day, there's like a huge shift in satisfaction for my day, productivity, alignment, like so much shifts.
Yes, yes, yes. This is huge, because I just think that there's this conversation of like, I don't have time. But what if these practices supported your workflow such that the amount of work that you got done in 6 hours, you might actually do in 5 if you attune to your vata beforehand, because maybe you won't make the mistake or misread the email or send something out and then have to fix it. Like that's happening all the time. And then it adds to this illusion that we don't have time and we don't have time, when really the way to break out of that is to pause, to regroup, to check in with vata, and to approach our work from this very centered place, which, just as you're saying, it brings generativity, efficiency, flow, inspiration, and absolutely satisfaction. I feel that completely. And I still have that conversation with myself of like, do I really have time? I have a lot to do today. And I just have to trust that the practice will help me be more generative with my time throughout my day. And the more I've trusted that, the more I've seen it to be true.
I've also noticed like an ability to have better discernment. So oftentimes, like, I will just busy myself to busy myself, and some of those things don't even need to be handled. But like, if I'm able to slow down at the beginning and get clear, I've got the discernment to be like, all right, these three things are really the priority today. And then I get those things done, and I'm like, you know what? That was a good day. And the rest of that stuff, like,
Didn't need to
sometimes
happen.
I get caught up, and I think other people might experience this too, and just kind of chugging along, doing without realizing that we're doing just to do, not because it's actually
Mhm.
moving us towards what the intention is.
And I think that can relate to Vata getting kind of swept up, just like having this tendency to want to move, even though the medicine for Vata is actually to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. Molly, can we just like outline sort of what are the qualities that pacify Vata dosha? So when we're thinking about like our food and our practices, like our daily routines, herbal support that we might want to bring in, anything, um, ways of communicating, like all the things, behaviors, what are the qualities that pacify Vata dosha?
So the qualities that pacify Vata dosha are things that are the opposite of wind. So wind is light, cold, rough, dry. So Vata is going to be balanced by things that are heavy or grounding, stable or still or static, things that are warm, smooth, like ground rough. What else am I missing?
Yeah, I
Um,
think like also like soft and like that sort of slimy quality, that like viscous or like cloudy. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I just oily.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So those qualities can show up in anything. Our whole world is made up of the doshas. They can show up in the foods that we choose. So foods that are soupy, warm, gently spiced, with oil like ghee are going to be balancing for Vata. Porridges, like you had mentioned, spices like cinnamon and ginger, fennel that are, a little bit warming and will support digestion without being too sharp for Vata. And we can also choose these balancing qualities in the way that we care for our body. So, again, oil massage, warm baths, staying cozy, putting on your socks. A big one in the fall is actually like covering your head and neck when you go for a walk. Vata can really um, be influenced through the head and neck. Let's just say if you were to walk in the wind, just keep yourself covered up a bit so that your Vata doesn't get riled up by the wind. And also, in beyond how we feed ourselves and how we care for ourselves, um, approaching ourselves with this gentleness, this softness that we were speaking of earlier in our conversation, that is also very balancing for Vata. Vata is also balanced by the sweet taste, the sour taste, and the salty taste. Those tastes have like grounding, kind of moistening qualities that will really benefit Vata. You can notice if your cravings have changed with the change of season. You may also notice how your cravings change in that postpartum window, and you really do want more nourishing, oily, sweet foods, um, especially sweet, but also the sour and salty. So those are things that we can all be incorporating: more warmth, more oil, more gentleness in all capacities.
It's pretty cool to just listen to the body because I feel like I kind of grew up ignoring most things, most of the basic things of like, how does this taste make me feel? Or what am I craving right now that's, something that's actually good for my body versus something that I probably shouldn't be eating in my body. But there's so much information that's available when we slow down and actually just invite ourselves to listen or observe.
Yes. Yes. And when I say the sweet taste, what I'm thinking of is dates, mangoes, basmati rice, whole grains, sweet potatoes, carrots, beets. All of those are foods that embody the sweet taste. And often a craving for candy, let's say, is actually the body craving the sweet taste. Candy might just be what it's more familiar with associating with, but you can meet that same craving with something else of the sweet taste that's actually wholesome and nourishing and really delivers on the grounding vata balancing qualities. But I do like to tell people there's wisdom in that craving for the sweet taste. Don't bypass it and say, I don't know, I just crave candy all the time. Maybe that craving is actually a craving for sweetness, for grounding, and ultimately, for love. The oily quality in Ayurveda is related to love, and so is the sweet taste connection as well. So it's a beautiful, anytime we're talking about balancing vata, it's really beautiful to think of it in terms of like love and connection as well. Like that a sticky quality is balancing for vata as well, because on its own it's kind of hard and smooth. So the connective component is really beautiful to bring in.
I love that. And I just really appreciate looking at sort of these doshas on a universal level and how they show up in relationships and in, daily life beyond, within my own body. It's very affirming. It's like such a greater wisdom that, when we tap into it, it will
Mhm.
have the answers that we seek.
Oh, I completely agree. I feel like Ayurveda has a piece of wisdom for everything, every direction. And it doesn't just have to be Ayurveda. I've found Ayurveda to be a very helpful modality in coming back to this practice of really just listening to what my body is calling for. Ayurveda kind of offers the language for that, but you're so right that we when we tune in, the information of what the body needs is there.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
amazing.
so when, so folks who are listening who are sort of brand new to this, um, what's a good place to start sort of becoming friends with our Vata dosha and all of our doshas?
Oh, I think speaking kindly to yourself. I think it's easy for people with vata imbalance to say like, I'm so forgetful. I'm always late. I am doing, to kind of get frustrated with the overwhelm of heightened vata and to then not really be able to see the gifts. So speaking kindly and honoring and celebrating the moments of inspiration and curiosity that Vata brings, I think is a really beautiful, simple place to start. But an even more tangible thing would be to massage your feet with oil before bed. And
Mm,
that can be a gateway to massaging the whole body with oil. But massaging the feet before bed will really help ground the energy. It will support restful sleep. It will help regulate vata and the nervous system. And that is a great practice that anyone can be doing. Just keep a little oil on your bedside. You can always put a pair of socks on afterwards. That's where I would start. Where would you start? What is there another practice that you would recommend for supporting Vata?
yeah. Um, I love what you said about being kinder to yourself and I think for me, I'm gonna go back to slowing down, just slow down the pace and remember your breath, knowing
Mhm.
that that breath, that wind, that prana that we have inside, see, prana is the subtle essence of Vata dosha, that life force. And so, the subtle is the most powerful, really. I mean, most of our what are we like 99.99999% energy and like the rest is matter. So we are going to respond quickest to energy. And so our breath is the way to direct that. Our breath is how we impact that. And that, as we said earlier, opens the windows for us to see so much more than we couldn't before.
Mhm. Yes, that is so beautiful. I
Yeah.
I also want to add drink warm water. Drink warm, everyone, drink warm water. Take the ice cubes out, sip warm water all day. Your Vata will be forever in gratitude if you can make that simple shift.
Yeah, I invite you all. I double dog dare you to try the massaging your feet and like one other thing, and I promise you're gonna be like, oh, they were not lying. And I promise drinking warm water is not gross, it's addictive. Yeah, it's a really good one. So Molly, you lead seasonal cleanses, and I just wanted to ask you about what that looks like for folks who are looking for guidance and how to do that this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. So I offer a seasonal cleanse called the Reset for Resilience, and that begins in early October. And the reason why this happens during the beginning of Vata season is because there's this moment when we have this pitta built up from summer. We have our doshas may be a little bit aggravated from the seasonal transition. And as the weather gets colder, our bodies start to constrict. So the idea is that before Vata really brings in more coldness and constriction to our bodies, we want to release some of the excess doshas, some of the imbalance of the doshas, as well as ama, which is like um, undigested food, kind of toxic buildup in the gut. So Ayurveda would say this window, this transition in the beginning of fall is really the time when the body is ripe to release before it then kind of goes into a little more of a slow hibernation type energy. So I guide people through a very nourishing process that involves eating warm, easy to digest foods that give the body a break from having to work so hard and really helps regulate Vata, Pitta, and Kapha so that ultimately you finish the cleanse feeling clear, resilient, regulated. You also finish with different tools for implementing an Ayurvedic routine and a lifestyle and recipes to make for yourself that are very easy. It's such a beautiful community. It's something I'm so proud to be able to offer. We've been doing this now, I think for maybe this is like the eighth or ninth time, and um, it's really dialed, and people come back every year to join again. So if you're curious about Ayurvedic cleansing, seasonal cleansing, something that is gentle, effective, lasting, this is a really beautiful place to start. It is all about care. There's no emphasis on control. There is no feeling of deprivation. It's really about feeling good. So
Mm,
thanks for asking.
that sounds amazing. I'm so glad that you are offering this, and I think it's a brilliant way to help people because it's not, there's some like there you gotta like follow through, and that's not always easy. So to do that in a community that's just really supportive, that's really effective.
It,
Yeah.
it, it makes such a difference. That's what everyone says every year. Like, wow, it was so helpful to do this in community, and everyone's checking in and sending pictures of their food, and it's really life-giving. And we have all tried to do a cleanse on our own, and sometimes it goes fine, and sometimes we need more support and accountability. So that's what I offer.
Well, Molly, thank you so much for this awesome conversation on Vata Dosha. I love it. I love nerding out on all things Ayurveda, but really, it all comes down to the elements. It's like all about the elements and how they show up everywhere. We are one with this world that we live in. We are made up of these elements that are all around us. And if that is not grounding, I don't know
Yes,
what is.
yes, yes. I love existing in a framework that reminds us that we are nature. It really brings me peace as well. Thank you so much, Christine. I've loved connecting with you, and I'll see you when it's time to talk about Pitta. Is that
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait until it's wait a few months for that one because we missed it this summer. But
Okay.
Molly, thank you. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, Christine.
Shanti, Shanti. The Center for Sacred Window Studies has been training postpartum care providers, professionals who work with new families, and individuals passionate about postpartum care since 2018. We regularly host live free events alongside our online and in person training and certification programs. Hop on our newsletter list to get direct access to all of our events and community support gatherings. Our mission is not only in training conscious postpartum care providers, but in fostering a robust, informed, and thriving community of postpartum professionals. Once you step inside, you're family forever. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com to add your email to our newsletter list. You can support our work by subscribing to the Sacred Window podcast and sharing with someone you know who would love it. Thanks for being here and participating in the culture-wide shift that recognizes the need for and the importance of conscious postpartum care.